comment on how what's happening in India at the moment, following the rape and the death of that woman, and also the coverage of it here as well?
She said, would you like to comment on what's happening in India at the moment and coverage over here as well?
We knew what was happening about India more than most because our international network extends to India, and NCM and the Chhattisgarh Women's Organization is part of the global women's strike, and Manju Gadia, who is the point of reference for the women in 400 villages in Chhattisgarh, works with Dalit and tribal women against the rape by landlords, police, and politicians, as well as individual men, and their movement has been tremendous. And we knew that this was, although this may be a uniquely good organization, it's not a unique organization. We knew that there was a grassroots anti-rape movement in India. So when this burst out, we were not prepared. You're never prepared for a movement. You can't prepare for a movement. It's like a thief in the night, as Marx says. But we were not surprised by it, and we knew how deep the roots were of this massive movement. Now, what was striking to me about its reporting here was, I want to give an example of Woman's Hour. Woman's Hour, I don't go out of my way to hear it, but I'm an inveterate listener to Radio 4, which aggravates me constantly. But I can't turn it off. And there is Woman's Hour interviewing a woman from India who is saying there are thousands on the street and we are going to attack, you know, we are the women on the rural women are the ones who have got the worst of it, not the ones in the city. She didn't say Dalit and tribal, but she said the workers on the land, the farm workers and that, and they have to deal with an alliance, she said. I heard this on Woman's Hour, an alliance of police, landowners, and the political class. And the woman from Woman's Hour said, oh dear, that's a very gloomy picture. She said, no. She said, there are thousands on the street. How can it be gloomy? And, you know, I think Woman's Hour got a shock. Because we are really, as an anti-rape movement here, and Women Against Rape and Black Women's Rape Action Project are both at our center, so I have daily reports. Many women's organizations that are anti-rape have, or say they're anti-rape, have police on their boards and do not attack what the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, the courts, all of them prevent from being attacked, being identified, being shown up, and that they have absolutely either to defend women or they have to resign or be kicked out, etc. You know, war can speak for itself. Is BRAP here? Maybe not, but war is definitely here, and they can defend themselves. The point is that the Indian movement has begun to encompass in one movement across the rural and urban divide, and I think finally across sectors, that is, means across caste and class, and that is tremendous, and it's very hard, I have to say, to get a picture of that movement here, although there shouldn't be any difficulty. You know, these women are ready to talk, and they have a lot to say, and they're full of ideas, and they're full of the movement, because, you know, when there's a movement in the street of thousands and thousands of people, your mind begins to work. It's just you are transformed by it, and by its power and by its possibilities. But we are not getting the best of that. But we've done the best we could to advertise, and Manju wrote a statement for us which we tried to incorporate into the demonstrations here without a lot of luck, because some people did not want to hear from women in India, and they were Indian women, but they were not too keen to be so against the Indian High Commission and, you know, the establishment. There's a lot of backing down in confronting the establishment within feminism. We're a bit different from that. So I think it's fantastic, and I think it's going to spread, and I'm hoping to hear the reports from China. That's my only wish. That the Chinese women will take it up and clean up the mess in a lot of ways, because you do not attack rape and the establishment that defends rape without really shaking the whole society. And there are a lot of things that are going to be shaken, and shaken a lot, I think.
Egypt, you say it's also Egypt.
Well, you know, in Egypt, the women had a day when, when they, during the height of the revolution, although that revolution has not gone away, during the height of the revolution, the women organized to have their own demonstration, and the reactionary army and thugs, etc., drove them away. But they came back later with the support of the movement, and they were guarded by the movement so they would not be attacked again. So there's a lot to say. There really is a lot to say. But one of the things we're going to have to, now we get into controversy, okay. One of the things we're going to have to be clear about is that if the establishment points a finger at somebody, the same establishment who is always defending rapists, all of a sudden they discover that this man is a rapist, that we have to be very careful before we agree with them. And that's what happened with Julian Assange. And there was a nice woman who interviewed me from The Statesman, and I pointed out to her that an article she'd done spoke in the same breath about Jimmy Savile, that friend of the establishment, and Julian Assange, that enemy of the biggest imperial power the world has ever known. And I pointed out that you cannot speak about these two in the same breath. And she said she'd have to think about it. And then I asked her, didn't your friends tell you that that was a great mistake? And she said, no, nobody. And we have to think about that. We have to think about how easy it has been for Julian Assange. I don't know if he's innocent or guilty. I'm not discussing that. How, it is unclear just, how vague it is, how imprecise it is that these two very different men with very different political perspectives, were equated. That's a very important part of getting the anti-rape movement in gear.
Okay, yes, you have, the sister over there, and then you have the brother on the right, okay?
I was just wondering how...
You have to speak up, otherwise we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Louder!
I just wanted to know how the Caribbean has influenced your views, the Caribbean
has influenced
in regards to your feminism.
in regards to your feminism.
Well, that's the first time anybody has asked me that, and I'm thrilled. When I was in the Caribbean, I was mostly in Trinidad, and there was a great struggle for Caribbean independence and federation. And the Women's League of the leading nationalist party asked me to speak to their, I don't know what kind of a meeting it was. It wasn't a very big meeting, but it was a meeting that represented, you know, many parts of the country. And I spoke about my ideas. Listen, this was a long time ago. It was 1959. I spoke about my life and how women in the United States, which is mainly what I knew by then, because I hadn't been in England very long before I went there. And then I said, okay, now you have to tell me about you. And my mind was blown, because what they described was an independence and federation movement that I had never heard about, and my clever husband didn't know either. They talked about how they had organized to come into Port of Spain, which is where the meeting took place, how early in the morning they got up, how they cooked the lunch for the children and for the man, and how they organized. And then they told him, when he said, you know, you're going and that, they say, I have to do it for the nation. And he couldn't say no. He had to let them go. And, you know, this was a struggle that was entirely hidden, you know, and I learned a great deal more. I learned about domestic workers and how they were trying to get it together. And I learned about the enormous gap between women at the bottom and women who were rising in the new nationalist hierarchy. And so I really learned a great deal, first of all about women, but through women, I learned about what it meant to be in the, and I'm using this word advisedly, the periphery. I knew how people felt when London was the capital of every West Indian island, and how it feels when you feel the real thing is happening elsewhere and you're just a poor copy or trying to, you know, follow behind. I learned a great deal, and I learned about race in another way. It was an overwhelming black society. They didn't care two hoots about race. They were all black. So, you know, this wasn't an issue. They knew about racism. They knew something about racism in other countries, and they knew about racism because white and light-skinned people had power that black people did not, but they felt they could manage all that. And I found out something about what every country knows if they look, every movement knows, that the West Indian people wanted to be together, but the politicians were so ambitious that they kept the people apart. And I have to say that the man who expressed this most clearly for me was when I read Julius Nyerere's articles, and he spoke about the fact that he was ready to prevent Tanzania independence, to hold it back if other countries around were ready to join with Tanzania, so that they wouldn't begin as different countries, but they would start life as a federation of East Africa. And he said, because now that it's happened, we've gone for our independence, they've gone for theirs, they have so many flags and national anthems and 21-gun salutes, you know, you never can get them together again. You know, these politicians are so rooted in their own individual power. And I found out that politicians there, whom I was very close to, I could see close up, they ate at my table sometimes, were just exactly like the others, only these were bigger thieves, much bigger thieves. These people thought small, but these here, they go for billions. How corrupt they are, you saw their egos, you saw it all. I learned that all in the West Indies, and it has stood me in very good stead.
Okay, yes. Nathan.
During the civil rights activist years in the USA, there was obviously a lot of grassroots movements that were dedicated to self-defense and protecting women from being raped and things like that. How do you feel about, I'm just sort of interested in your opinion on how you feel about the fact that those groups, particularly like led by Robert F. Williams and things like that, have been neglected for a popular narrative where it's all about anti-violence and Martin Luther King and things like that, that they were the truly heroic ones, whereas these people that were actually standing up and fighting for their women and fighting for each other are now sort of considered the dangerous radicals. I was just sort of wondering what your sort of views on that are.
Well, Robert F. Williams was a great man. People don't know about him, but he stood against the Klan, and the Klan used to come into Monroe, North Carolina, and he organized black people to have guns, and when the Klan came in, the people started shooting, and the Klan never came back. So that was nice. And then the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People wanted to put him on the carpet and throw him out because he was violent. But I think we misunderstand King. King came in, and he didn't know from nothing. The movement had just begun. Rosa Parks, who was part of the anti-rape movement, I think you might know some of that now, part of the black women's anti-rape movement, that's where she got her experience not to go on the bus. And so he was faced with a movement which he was not trained to lead. And then he had a few years, he did some good things. He did I Have a Dream speech. I can't bear that speech, it's terrible. It's a terrible speech, I have a dream. No, he didn't have any dream at all. You know, he had a nightmare and he didn't want to deal with it because he was just next door to the White House. And then there was a riot, a rebellion in Los Angeles. And he went out in the streets in Los Angeles, in Watts, which I know because I used to live there, in Watts, and tell them to go home. And they told him, go to hell. And Bayard Rustin, who was a gay man in the black movement, but had to be in the closet at that time, in the 60s, he said publicly the crowd was right and we were wrong. He was out, you know, which was a big step forward. And King really fell in popularity. And then a lot of things happened, which is not necessary to go into, but he understood more and he had experience. And then he did two things. In 1967, in fact on the 4th of April, he made a speech which was extraordinary and said he was going to come out against the war. He had not come out against the Vietnam War, and he made a speech which was absolutely, because the man was a great, great speaker, a great orator. And he said, you know, we ain't going to study war no more. And then he went down to Atlanta to support the garbage workers, what we call sanitation workers, what we call dustmen. And he said, what we need is a national black strike. All the black workers come up, they would finish with racism in a day. In a day! And they killed him almost immediately. That's what happened to Martin Luther King. To the day, on the 4th of April, 1 year after he made the anti-war speech, he was dead. Because what he was calling for, not violent, but definitely big and revolutionary. And the American establishment were not going to have that. And then they killed Bobby Kennedy as well to make sure that that whole educated elite, which the movement had educated and trained, they killed Malcolm, who was our speaker, he spoke for us. He said in public what black people always said in their kitchens. He said it. He told the real story. They killed him when he was about to break out of his black separatism. Then they killed King, and then they killed Robert Kennedy. And by that, then they put people in prison. That's how they dealt with it. That's how they dealt with the movement. But you mustn't think that King was a traitor. You mustn't think that. I used to think that. And I'm sorry. I kind of publicly beg pardon because I didn't know this other thing which was hidden. And the thing about King, the thing about those three, I mean, there are many, but the thing, and the four, there was four. They killed Fred Hampton in Chicago. And those four people were extraordinary, not merely because they were dedicated to the movement, and they were true revolutionaries. I don't mean they had a party. I don't mean any of that nonsense that the left goes on with. They really wanted to organize massively against the state across the divisions among us. The thing about them is that each of them could have had multiracial support. King, a lot of white people liked him. And if he had had a black strike, the white people would have come on it. They weren't going to be left behind working while all black people taking a day off. Never. They were going to join. And they were going to be faced with a massive strike in the United States. They had to kill him from their point of view. And we didn't know how to protect him from our point of view. And this was true with the other three as well. Fred Hampton was bringing Latino men and Afro men together. Stop fighting between the Puerto Ricans and the people of African descent. Let us get it together. The story is extraordinary and hidden. He was a great man, and he was 21 or 22 when he was killed. He had already the experience and the leadership and the political perspective that we needed. So they killed him. So we have to look again at it and find out about all these things. But behind, while this, I have to say this, while this was going on and the movement, I'm no expert on the movement, and I was here or I was in the West Indies and I missed a lot of, what really went on in the States. There were these welfare mothers, and they were a fantastic part of the anti-racist movement. For Money for Women, the Wages for Housework campaign learned from them. Money for women, wages for unwaged work. They didn't use that language, they just did it and they said it. And they were anti-war and they fought for real education, really anti-racist education. They did fantastic work. And we have the honor to have worked with a couple of them, a couple of those leaders. And they were extraordinary women. And I shall never forget them. They're all dead now. But the movement, the same point that I raised with this, you have to be very precise about what it is people did, how they did it, who they did it with, and what they accomplished, and what we can learn from them, and what we can build on, and what they left behind. I mean, these are questions, and each of them we have to go into and look at closely. I'm not saying that this is the end. There was Chico Mendes. There were people in a number of countries who were offering international leadership, not only in the United States, but the movement in the United States was absolutely crucial because that was the belly of the monster. And we really everywhere need the movement in the U.S. to make a way for us because they're so pervasive. Where, with Israel as their, what do they call it? Pardon me. When the gunslinger in the cowboy movies, the hired guns That's Israel. They are definitely the hired guns. And I'm a member of the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and we're just putting out a pamphlet, having some trouble with the printer, and it will be out, I hope, by Monday, about Israel's major industry, which is repression. Major industry. And the United States at this moment in time can't do without them. That's the symbiotic relationship which President Obama could not deal with. I'm giving very long answers, and maybe people have better things to say. I'm sorry, but the questions,
very nice answers.
Do you want to please address the audience so they can hear you?
My English is so bad,
I understand it.
but I understand you. Okay, I'm living in Germany. I am from Tunisia, and I find splendid.
Sorry, shall I repeat? You live in Germany. You're from Tunisia. Is that what you said?
Yes,
right.
yes. I am living in Germany since 34 or 38 years.
38
because
years in
of
Germany.
that, I forgot my English. Yes.
Yeah.
And then forgot
Because
how
I
English.
am coming from Tunisia. I remark that movements, such kind of movements, have no big chance in this world.
Movements have no big chance in this world.
Perhaps the other revolution, what happens now in Tunisia, yes, it's a miracle, yes.
What's happening in Tunisia now is it's like a miracle.
A miracle. But Gandhi was killed too. Gandhi. And
they killed Gandhi.
Yes. My question is: is there any chance for people who like really the mankind, humanity?
Who love
Is
mankind.
there any chance for people who love mankind, humankind?
Is there any chance?
That's
Is there
what
any
I
chance?
think that is everybody's question.
Yes.
I think there is.
Yes.
And I think, not only I think there is, I think that it had better move. We need that movement now, and what happened is a miracle, and what is happening in Egypt continues. And what they're not telling you, even on Channel 4 News, that the struggle in Egypt is over workers' rights. That this is a working class struggle, but the left is not. They're so. I don't like to say backward, but they are. They cannot tell people in this country, listen, what you are living through is what they are fighting for in Egypt. You have to know that this struggle is going on. It is your struggle because they want to have the trade unions respected. What the issue in Egypt, one major issue in Egypt, is that the working class have formed independent trade unions that bypass the state institutions that unions have become everywhere in the world. That includes England. And they don't want that. Morsi doesn't want it. The ex-Mubarak people don't want it. Nobody wants the working class to be autonomous for itself in struggle with its own organizations. But we do. We do. And we have to organize internationally so that we can support each other in these crucial moments when our lives and all that we have won is on the line. Greenland is melting, and the oil companies want to use it as a business opportunity. And they are suicidally greedy. Nobody is saying that because they're not starting with the human race. They are suicidally greedy. They don't care even if they die, but they'll die with billions in their hand. They think they're invincible, but they're not. And that's a strength for us, so long as we know that we are not, and that we have to be together. And that moment is coming, you know, that moment of crossover between different races and different sectors, you know, and different countries, working class people, grassroots people, waged and unwaged and different. That moment is coming. But you know, there are two problems. One of them is that people are afraid to tackle their own organizations or leave them. You know, either they change or you go and form another one and say to hell with you. That's what the Egyptians did. That's what they want, that's what they're fighting to defend right now in the streets in Tahrir Square, etc. And the other thing is that well, it's really the same thing. We don't think we can win, and we have to begin to believe in the perspective of winning. That's why the book has that name. You know, Sex, Race, and Class, the perspective of winning is the perspective of destroying the divisions among us and not being caught in this sector or that sector, but seeing your connection with every sector. I'm not talking about making links. Making links assumes that we're really not together, but we should try to join together. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we are intrinsically together, but our connections, our deep connections, are hidden or buried, and we have to bring those connections out in ways that are useful for our liberation. That's a big problem. But you know, I did see the movement that elected Obama the first time. And it happened very quickly. And the Indian movement, how long did it take? I mean, it didn't happen, and years passed, it didn't, and all of a sudden, within weeks, people were on the street, and within weeks they were clarifying how they stood in relation to other people in the same movement, which is so crucial. You know, you have to know where you stand in the movement and what are the political tendencies and how they can be incorporated or refused. And you have to learn to make those decisions, and you have to learn how to do it and share how to do it with other people. So you say, listen, this is what you did last time. It doesn't work. Don't do it again. For God's sake, you're better than that. You know, we go through that at the center. You know, everybody here is going to be bored with what I'm saying. But, you know, that's what you have to do in order to win. And you have to do the work. And you have to do it as a priority. In spite of the fact that you have a paper to do, you have to do this other work. Your paper will be delayed, but it will be better. I met a lot of people in the US who they liked very much what I said, and they said, oh, this is going to help me with my paper. And I said to myself, oh dear, that's not why I came from the UK to speak in England, is to help her with her paper. You know, I'm trying to build a movement, and that's what I want her to be doing. She can do her paper. I'm not against her doing her paper. But there have to be priorities, and the movement is the priority. And I remember this woman who interviewed me, when towards the end of the interview, she said, you use the word movement all the time, what is it? And I felt very sad, actually. I felt very sad because I've never had to define it before. I've just assumed it and assumed that people know that it's when people get together and they're excited to be together, and because there's something they need to do and they're ready to do it and to work out how to do it and in a collective way and to bring others along, etc. That's a movement. You know, that's what happened in Tunisia, and that's what happened in Egypt, with a much bigger working class population and with a great feeling for Palestine. In Egypt in particular, because the Rafah crossing, which is the only exit for Gaza, goes into Egypt, and so the fight was about whether the Rafah crossing would open or would stay open or would be closed and all the rest. But there were thousands on the street chanting Free Palestine in Egypt, in Tahrir Square. They didn't need any coaxing about that, and they didn't need any leadership at all. They knew exactly what was needed.